In the fast-paced world of marketing in America, nothing beats new. New cars, new tech, new drugs, new deals make up the bulk of advertising in America. For a while, the same could be said in pro sports. New teams flooded the country's sports leagues with the allure of nickname reveals, new jerseys, new traditions, and a brand new history left to unfold. And then they just stopped. This is what you don't know about expansion. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hey, everyone.
And today we want to talk about a topic that shows up in what-if conversations at water coolers around the country and definitely all across the internet, and that's expansion. Blake, like when you were growing up, did you ever play like sports video games where you could create a team, create a team mode?
So I would say my primary sports game was FIFA. I owned football, basketball, baseball periodically, but FIFA was the rock, if you know what I'm saying. Like the one you have every year, still going to this day, by the way. And I would say that while Ultimate Team, FIFA Ultimate Team is my current favorite way to play the game, I have in the past created new teams. I cannot remember the names of them though, and that's going to bug me.
Yeah, my favorite in those is the NCAA football games. So naturally, I created Barton College because go Bulldogs. But in my youth, I also created a UNC Bailey, a small town here in North Carolina. Because why not? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I think in one baseball game, I had the Carolina Aviators. So that was cool. Just put some glasses on. Yeah. But also planes.
Speaking of expansion, wasn't that in the running for Charlotte's MLS team name?
Yes, I think Aviators was one of the names. But they ended up going with Charlotte FC.
Or did we just make that up? I don't remember.
We might have made it up. It would have been a great name. They had one that would have been really good, and I think it was like Arrow related, but they ended up going with Charlotte FC because soccer people suck.
That's just what you do. It's just the town, the city, state, football club.
I'm not complaining. I pull for the Washington football team, so I think that's.
I was going to say you're very proud of that nickname, so be careful.
Hey. NFC East champions. Can't change the name now. Just stick with it. Stick with it. So the reason we are talking about this is just recently the NBA's commissioner, Adam Silver, admitted that the NBA was looking into expansion. There was a question asked about, hey, you've lost a lot of revenue during the last year for COVID. Would you be willing to expand? And they threw out a fee of $2.5 billion as the expansion fee. Adam Silver agreed that they were thinking about maybe expansion, but called $2.5 billion very low compared to what the league would actually be expecting, which is just an inordinate sum of money. That's not too crazy, though. The last team to get sold actually sold for over $2 billion. And expansion fees generally go over actual franchise sales. We'll get into that in a second. Major League Baseball commissioner. Wait, did it just bleep me out for saying that? You try to say his name.
Wait. Oh, that's weird.
I guess when you call the World Series trophy a hunk of metal, you end up getting classified as a curse word. I guess we can't say the name.
Oh.
I guess we can't say the name on the podcast. But the MLB commissioner straight up acknowledged that expansion was a possibility. He's quoted as saying Portland, Las Vegas, Charlotte, Nashville, in the United States, certainly Montreal, maybe Vancouver in Canada. We think there's places in Mexico we could go over the long haul. So he not only acknowledged that expansion was possible, he basically told who was the front runners in the process. So it seems like expansion is kind of getting its wheels running. Obviously, the NHL's just expanded once this past decade and is hitting another team next year. And MLS is just sowing their seeds across the entire country, it seems. So they're involved in it heavily, but it seems like the big three might be getting their toes wet in the expansion situation. So that's kind of exciting.
And it's been long enough, right? Now there's like you said in the intro, the allure of a new thing showing up. There's a lot of science and a lot of study that goes into these, where you have to pick a city to put 1/32nd, which seems like a really small number, but you have to put your name into a city. That means a lot. So you have to be very, very careful about where you put it. And there's studies and stuff and articles written about how you choose, and it's been long enough. I mean, it seems like such a rare thing in our lifetime because we've only seen just a few expansions across American sports in the last 20 years even. But to older folks who remember some of the earlier expansions before we were around, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head right there, because if you're of a certain age, and it actually is just a small age bracket that knows this, but if you're of a certain age, you grew up in the time where, like, from 1960 through 1990, everybody's, especially 1960 to 1980, the leagues were just going to town. And then if you're our age, like you said, I've only seen the leagues do it, each league do it once, maybe twice in my lifetime, and I was very young for almost all of it. Each league, minus the NHL, who is currently expanding, and the MLS, who we're going to get to, I think is running a Ponzi scheme, possibly. The other three leagues are in their longest stretch of no expansion since expansion began. In Major League Baseball, they went 16 years between when Toronto and Seattle joined the league in 1977 until 1993, when Miami and Denver showed up. But we're currently at 23 years, because in 98, Tampa and Arizona Diamondbacks became new teams. Since then, none. 23 years. That's the longest stretch since 1960. The NBA is in the longest in its history. The previous long was only 9 years. 1995, Toronto and Vancouver joined the NBA. Then in 2004, the new Charlotte franchise kind of rejoined the NBA. So we're 17 years now with no new teams, which is the longest in league history. The NFL is tying its streak. They did go 19 years from 1976, when Tampa and Seattle joined, to 1995, when Charlotte, which is Carolina, and Jacksonville joined. But we're going into 19 years because Houston joined in 2002. No new teams in the 19 years since. And the NHL almost met its record. It had gone 17 years between a failed expansion in Kansas City and Washington to 1991. But now, not now, but it had been 16 years before they expanded to Vegas. So definitely something weird going on in the 2000s to make that go on. And it's time. It's time for a trivia question, Blake. Already.
I'm scared. I'm scared.
It's time. All right. So we're talking about expansion teams. So whom was the worst expansion team of all time?
So your definition of worst expansion team is worst first season?
Yes. So the worst first season. I'll give you a hint. It could not be any worse.
So they never won a game? So if they didn't win a game, it had to be NFL, because every other league plays too many games. Worst NFL. Here, I'll ask a question.
Okay. I've said it in the last 5 minutes.
You said it? Oh no.
Yeah.
So it was one of the expansion time frames. Well, Charlotte did pretty well
They
in
went
their
7 and
inaugural
9.
season.
Yep.
That's probably the best in NFL history then for the first year.
Charlotte has had, yeah. Carolina Panthers, the best first season.
Dang. Okay, so then you mentioned Jacksonville. Ooh, they were probably bad. And Tampa and Seattle. Man, all of those are good contenders. I'm good. Okay, so here's my thought process. It's funny that one of them just won the Super Bowl, so I'm throwing the Bucks. Final answer.
That is correct. The Tampa Bay Bucks went 0-14.
Oh wow!
They went 0-14 back in 1976. So,
Dang!
bang bang.
Did you do that on purpose?
Hey, you got to bring people down. You know, when they're up here, you just got to kind of bring them back down to earth. Everything you were once 0-14. They actually went 0-12 in their second season to get started, so they lost 26 games in a row before finally.
Oh my gosh! Okay.
All right, so this isn't a trivia question, but I'm pretty sure you can answer it. There's a one-word answer to this question, but we're going to break it down into 3 parts. But why do leagues expand? Ultimately, there's one reason.
Money.
It's all about money. We can sum it up there. But essentially, it's how to make money. The way people are thinking about making money in a given time is really what expansion, in a way, pro sports is all about. For good and for bad, that's the story. One reason that we saw leagues expand is to beat another league to expanding. So we've talked a little bit in some of our stories about league competition between the NFL and the AFL, the American League and the National League, and some things like that. And a lot of these expansions in the 60s and 70s in particular are motivated in part by this, right? So the NFL and AFL were both expanding on top of each other because the AFL existed in new markets, right? So Boston, Buffalo, Denver, Oakland, LA, a second team in New York. They were the first team to Dallas, Kansas City, Miami, and Cincinnati. All of that is because the AFL is trying to poke and prod at the NFL. And all those teams end up, becoming NFL teams at some point. But to the NFL's credit, they expanded to Minnesota and then really looked to the Southeast where they went to Atlanta and New Orleans at the same time. So that's one deal. My favorite version of this type of expansion is a league that actually never played in it's really great. In the 60s, a new major league that wasn't the AL or the NL tried to get off the ground. They were going to call it the Continental League. And it was headed up by a New York attorney named William Shea, who we all know of Shea Stadium fame. His idea.
Say, wait a minute.
Yeah. His idea was to get a new team in New York City, right? Because the Dodgers and Giants had left in the 50s. It left a void. There had been 3 teams in the city. Now it's just the Yankees. So he was looking to bring not Major League Baseball back, but kind of that way to New York City. And so he got some people together and, just like the AFL, picked a bunch of new markets that were growing and emerging in that time frame. And he put together a league. So there was going to be a team in New York. There was going to be a team in Denver, Houston, Minneapolis, Toronto. Eventually they were going to go to Atlanta, Dallas, and Buffalo. No major league teams in those cities by that point. That threatened the existing leagues. And so they went directly to Shea and said, hold up. This is a great idea you've had, but we don't want there to be a third major league. So instead of you starting a new team in New York, and that's the only way it's going to be successful, and they need New York. So instead of you joining them, we'll give you a new National League team. We'll give you your National League team in New York. Just come over here, drop everything else. And so he agreed. The National League took the New York franchise and the Houston franchise and then the American League put a new team in LA and took the Minneapolis franchise from the Continental League. And that's how those teams came to be. And of course, eventually, Denver, Toronto, and Dallas also got teams as well out of that brouhaha.
Imagine being a hotshot attorney from New York. I'm going to create my own baseball league. And then someone knocks on your door late at night. And they're like, hey, listen, knock it off.
Yeah. Because so a lot of legal stuff going on. Because some of the commissioners of baseball were like judges and things. So apparently, if you want to be in baseball, you got to be a judge or a lawyer. If you want to be a commissioner, you can just be an idiot, and it works out. So there's hope for everybody. Sorry, we don't editorialize here. I'm sorry. Rob Manfred, if you're listening, we actually hate you. It's real life, though. So the second reason to make money is you expand the footprint of your league. And we see this actually happen in college conferences more now than we do in pro sports, because a lot of those expansions and realignments are about adding this state or this city to our existing footprint. And the logic is the same for pro sports as it was for college sports. Now, if we add a new city that's got a bunch of new viewers, right, and essentially a whole state in some cases, then we can ask more of our TV partners in the next round of TV negotiations. If you look at the dates, especially of the expansions in the 90s, they line up with TV rights negotiations. So a new team would start a couple of years, like the last year or two of a TV deal. So now you've got, hopefully, new viewers, ratings have gone up a little bit. Now you go get extra cash. Those owners are making their cut of the expansion fee up front, and then the new TV money brings in some more money, and so everything gets better. Before there were nationwide TV deals, though, the only way to grow interest in your league was to put a team in there, right? Nobody's writing daily about your sport, particularly for the leagues that aren't Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball got a lot of coverage nationwide, but if you're the NFL and the NBA, and God bless them, but the NHL, in those time periods, you need teams in cities to get people to recognize that you have a league. And so that was a great way to do that too. You expand into these cities that can hold it so that they can hold their own there. And so that's generally in the 90s and the NBA's in the 70s and 80s, while they were trying to gain a foothold, because the NBA was still having finals games tape delayed in the 70s and 80s, playoff games tape delayed. So they were trying to get, an in that way. But there you go. Improving the footprint is reason number 2 for expansion.
The footprint thing is interesting because it's not just about like land mass here in America, because there's a lot of rural America, and you can't just necessarily walk into South Dakota and call them like the South Dakota Rushmores and people will come flocking like that. That probably wouldn't work, because the population of a place like South Dakota is just not high enough to sustain a fan attendance at a professional sports. Even like a small MLS stadium couldn't. Nobody out there cares about soccer anyway. But you have to go not only where there's land mass for you to take over, quote unquote, but there has to be people there for you to take over.
The third reason for expansion, money-wise, is because you just need the money right now. So if we had an advertising deal with J.G. Wentworth, we would play that now because it's my money and I need it now. That's what some of these leagues do. And this is where we're going to make fun of Major League Soccer for just a second, because they are the prime example of this. This is expansion in professional sports as a multi-level marketing campaign or a Ponzi scheme, because it's essentially, I've bought into this league and my team is hemorrhaging money. All of our teams are hemorrhaging money. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell 2 more teams, and that'll cover our losses, or it'll make us make a profit because owners split. If there's 30 teams, you bring in 2 new ones. Whatever that expansion fee is, the owners, the 30 existing owners, split it up. So it's a great way to earn cash right now. As long as you've got a TV deal, as long as you've got franchise valuations, right? Because you can lose money year over year and still be valued pretty well because you've got property and intellectual property, things like that. So you bring in a new team and everything's okay. We've seen MLS do this basically every year for near a decade. They've expanded all over the place, and each one is worth more than the last. And it really does make it seem like they're just doing it to make cash. And so it's really curious how long they can do that. I mean, shout out to them for being able to.
I was going to say that I wonder how sustainable that is because if your 8 teams are losing money, you add 4 more real quick, so you make that little bit of money, but then the fan base still isn't there necessarily. The TV rights deals aren't necessarily there. So are you just like are your gains are higher, but are your losses also higher? So like instead of your waves being minimal, your waves up and down just keep getting, they're just balancing each other out, right? They just keep getting higher, keep getting lower until at some point you explode, right? Like I don't know if that's sustainable.
Yeah, it's really similar to if you buy into a stock early thinking it's going to go to the moon. It's like that where you're buying on promise, you're buying on the future. But there comes a point where it's like soccer is going to be good. This is going to be successful in our market, and it is successful in some markets. Attendance is good. Ratings are not good, but attendance is good. And so there's this promise that things are going to keep going up, 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 up. So I'm going to buy in, and eventually it's going to catch up to what I bought it for. But at some point, there has to be proof of that. At some point, you actually have to hit the expectation.
Yeah, it seems like a short-term fix for a long-term problem because the NBA obviously is going through some rough stuff with COVID and the money and stuff. So that's why that ultimately came up, is like, hey, this is a surefire way to make cash right now. Out of that $2.5 billion NBA expansion fee, each owner would make $100 million.
Yeah.
$100 million each.
Right up front.
Stupid money. Like they need any more money, but stupid money. I mean, obviously, an MLS team's expansion fee isn't $2.5 billion. I don't know what it is, but it ain't $2.5 billion. It might not even be $2.5 million in some places.
In some places, I think Charlotte paid 9 figures. I don't know the exact number, but it was kind of, it's getting steep in MLS now too.
No, that's wild.
Yeah. So
that's a lot of cash up front for what promise? Like you have an ESPN Plus deal and no one watches it. Yeah. Like it's a subscription based thing. So I don't know. It's a weird concept.
I want to play a new game. I want to play a new segment with you. Are you ready for this?
I'm scared again.
All right,
but let's do it.
All right. So we're going to call this Guess Who. All right. And here are the rules. You are going to guess what I am thinking of. I'll give you like a general idea of what it is. And then you can ask me questions in the vein of the hit board game, Guess Who. So your Guess Who here, Blake, the second worst expansion team in history. Second worst.
So they had to win a game. I'm gonna guess it's not football. Just off the bat. Does your expansion team play baseball?
They do not.
No baseball.
Oh, I forgot to tell you. You get 10 questions.
Oh, okay. So
one rules at you last minute.
Baseball. No baseball. I'm gonna say no football. So basketball or hockey? What are your team's colors? I'm cheating.
Ooh. Ooh. Are we going to allow that question? Do we have judges? Is that going to make it 2? I'll give you one color.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure I'm giving you the primary color.
If it's red, then take it back because that doesn't help.
Oh, that's tough. So do you want to keep that question? Because it's red.
Okay, well, let's just count that.
First listed primary color is red.
It's red. Okay. Does your team play in the Eastern time zone?
Yes.
Okay. I'm down to hockey and basketball. Does your team play hockey?
Yes.
Oh. I might just guess the Hurricanes and get it over with, but I don't think that's right.
Is that a question?
All right. Red hockey team on the East Coast. Primary red. I'm going to say not the Hurricanes. Is your team the Washington Capitals?
Oh, man. 5 questions and we have a winner.
Did I get it?
You got it. So the second worst expansion team on record. That's actually impressive. 5 questions. My goodness. The second worst expansion team on record is the 1974-75 Washington Capitals. They got 21 points by going 8-67-5. So winning 8 of 80 games, 10% winning percentage, .100. The worst record of any expansion team not named the Tampa Bay Bucks. You're good at this. See the president's thing. You are on a roll.
I'm stressed.
We're gonna put a heart rate on.
This is stressful.
We're gonna put a heart rate monitor on you for the next one just to see what happens. Now we need to talk about why we stopped expanding, right? Because every league in the 60s and the 70s just went to town. Every league in the 90s just went off, right? Shot their shot everywhere. But briefly in the 80s and since the turn of the century, it's been a drought. And so this also has to do with, wait for it, money. The reason we don't expand is, in particular, in Major League Baseball's case, in the recent memory, the lack of expansion is tied to the fact that new markets are being used as a bargaining chip for new stadiums. So any team that needs or wants a new stadium, wants new luxury suites, wants everything brand new, threatens or can use the veil of suspicion that they're going to relocate, particularly to the cities that the commissioner outlined in his quote, to get what they want. Look, if you don't want to give us, in Tampa's case, it's Montreal. If you don't want to give us a new dome to replace this one that you built without it. This is the craziest thing, by the way. I'm just going to stop for a second. Do you realize that because of all this expansion stuff in the 90s, late 80s and 90s, cities went absolutely bonkers building stadiums. Tampa built one. Anaheim built an arena. The Alamo Dome was built. And like the dome in St. Louis was built. Like several of these places were built with no tenant at all. They had no team. Nobody had promised to come. They just built it was like Field of Dreams. Like if you build it, somebody's coming.
That's so weird. Like, so it was funded by the cities, or just like these private investors showed up and was like, "Hey, St. Louis, we want an NFL team. We've got somebody with $1 billion cash who's willing to pay for a football stadium." And then eventually the Rams just show up.
Yeah,
like that.
That's it. That's literally what happened. Like so, St. Louis was in the running for the expansion team. Everybody thought that Charlotte and St. Louis were going to be the NFL's expansion teams that got announced in 93 to start play in 95. When they named Jacksonville, it threw things into disarray because actually the Patriots, in an article I read from 93, the Patriots were listed as the team that was going to relocate to St. Louis if they didn't get an expansion team. But it ended up being LA because Boston was still playing. I can't remember the name of their original stadium, but they hadn't built Gillette yet. So they were looking at moving. But yeah, no, it was just the cities themselves, because this is before the boom in sports money. Like, there was money in sports, obviously, but not the exorbitant sums we got today. But yeah, these cities were just doing it. They were just doing it blind. And looking up some stuff there about the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, that stadium, that arena was built, and then the NHL came. So I don't know.
That's wild.
And I say that because Tampa's in this spot. The Tropicana field that they play in is the dome that was built to bring a Major League Baseball team to the city. Not the best in the world. It has the same problems that all stadiums built in the 80s and 90s have, and that they're better than what came before it, but not what came after it. They don't quite live up to it. And so they've got an issue. Oakland is the same way. Both of them want new stadiums. And so he said in his interview, the commissioner said in his interview, once we get a collective bargaining agreement, once we get new stadiums figured out, then we're going to new places. So relocation is always kind of available. And so sometimes we don't expand because we want to keep places open for our existing teams to get what they want, because that's the league's job too. That keeps franchise values high for everybody. It also is an idea of keeping the club, if you will, very small, right? Owning a professional sports franchise is a very unique and very small club. Even with the, doing quick math in my head, I think it's 122, 123, getting ready to be 124 professional Big Four sports, 154 if we count MLS, right? That's only 154 people, though, and some of them are the same family, same person, same company. So it's even smaller than that. So you keep your ranks small. It makes it an exclusive club. That keeps your franchise values high too. And then people want to pay to get in to the club. So that's a reason why. It's also a bargaining chip. You can use expansion in your collective bargaining agreement negotiations, because by expanding, you are adding 2 more teams worth of roster spots worth of jobs, right? So the NBA would be adding 30 players to the Players Association. Baseball would be adding 50. Hockey would be adding 48. I think they carry 24 players. And then football would be adding 106 players to the Players Association. So you're adding jobs. So you can get, it can be a negotiation tactic where, hey, you know what? You guys are right. We're trying to take too much here. Have some more jobs. We'll increase revenue. You'll get more money. Everybody will be happy, right? And so that's one way of doing it. Also, we stopped, simply put, the NFL's original long stretch was because they didn't have a collective bargaining agreement. And so that was one of the things. We'll start expanding if you'll come to the table and actually negotiate. Let's get this thing signed. And you're not going to believe this. The last reason we stopped is that fans don't always like expansion. Can you imagine fans not liking things? I sure can't.
No, not really, because especially if you're in the market that they want to come, especially if you're in a market, in like a potential market, like, yeah. So when the MLS was talking about expanding, Raleigh was in it, separate and apart from Charlotte, and I wanted a team in Raleigh because I think that would be sick. I cannot imagine a reason why a resident of Raleigh wouldn't want a professional sports team here.
Right. So you are correct. It's not the fans of the new markets. It's the ones that either are in the existing cities or they're just general fans. And so people rightly acknowledge that when you make an expansion team, you're essentially just creating 1 or 2 terrible teams for a couple of years. Although that doesn't have to be the case. The NHL has showed us with their most recent expansion that you can actually create a Stanley Cup finalist in relatively short order if you just do the rules the right way. So it doesn't have to be a terrible team. More importantly, though, is this idea that when you expand too much, it dilutes the talent. So like you've got you've got X number of really good players, and so we've split them up 30 ways. Now we're going to split them up 32 ways or 34 ways. And so the good talent just kind of gets spread out, and I get that. But at the same time, we all love college sports, and that's the same situation. The talent there is very widely diluted, and it's still an entertaining product. So I get the idea. Same thing if we look, I know we make this comparison a lot, but if you look at European and international soccer, there's tons of teams, tons of players, and it's a good product, right? The talent, the dilution, kind of, you hit a point, equilibrium, everything works out. But yeah, that's another reason why expansion kind of, definitely not the reason, because if somebody can make money, they're going to. But it's a palatable thing for the fans to say, oh, yeah, we don't want to dilute the talent anymore. We don't want to, whatever. It's not the real reason, but it's there.
I would argue that diluting the talent is pretty important to the on-field or on-the-court product, like more important than probably you would believe it to be. And I'll counter your college football argument with this. Alabama doesn't play anybody until they reach the national semifinal game. Their regular season, they schedule their regular season like that on purpose. Let's be real. They play like Wofford on the first week, and Mac Jones plays the first quarter. It's 60-0, and then like whoever else comes, that sort of thing does happen, and they do that on purpose because they don't want to risk losing. But they are good enough to play ranked teams all year and still might not lose and still make it to the so. But they really don't play anybody. So like the only really good games are the bowls and the high tier bowls, and then the playoffs. So like that's why we keep seeing Clemson and Alabama over and over and over, is because the talent is diluted because there's hundreds of Division I football teams. But is it really? Because like we keep getting the same two best teams every year, it seems like.
Yeah, it definitely I see your point with that for sure, because you're right. It is the same couple of teams at the top, and I think that tends to happen. It depends on the sport, right? I think the NFL has it pretty well worked out that their parity rules are. I don't know. The NFL does some things that make it more entertainment than sports sometimes, where like every game seems like it's 31-28, 31-24, something like that. So I could see them being able to get away with it. Baseball, maybe. Definitely not the NBA. The NBA is the one that really needs to think about it, because we already have the whole super team situation, and adding more jobs for guys that maybe aren't NBA quality may not be the best thing for them. So I can see both sides of that argument, technically. I get that. So the last question we've got for you guys is, where do we go next? If leagues are to expand, like they seem to be moving towards, where would they go? What would it look like? The Athletic actually published a pretty good article at this. It was geared toward baseball, but I think it would fit for any sport. And they published it in January of 2021, so shout out to them. They looked at what leagues would be looking at in building a new team. So they measured the population growth, not just the size of a city, but is it growing, and how old are its citizens, which I think is part of the equation that gets left out. It's not just about being big and growing. There are cities in Florida that are growing because they're attracting people who are outside of the TV demographic. So that's not necessarily great. And so it's about youth, like Austin and Charlotte and Raleigh typically come up in those types of studies. They also looked at something that I didn't really know how to quantify, but they did. They looked at local industry. They classified that as any company in a city that had $500 million in revenue, not profit, just revenues in a given year. And again, Charlotte is one of the highest non-Major League Baseball cities. There's some other cities in there, Nashville, I believe, and some others that have a couple of sports, but not all four. But Charlotte's good in that one too. Charlotte, North Carolina. North Carolina's great. That's what I want y'all to hear. But just kidding. But it is, though. They also looked at support of other teams and the TV market size. So things that we would traditionally look at too. naturally, when you're looking at that list, if you think of cities that have a professional sports team but don't have all four, or an area that doesn't have all four, generally they are good candidates for expansion from what they don't have. So, like North Carolina, as a general rule, baseball is the only thing that isn't here. Baseball would be a good fit here, either Raleigh or Charlotte. If you're thinking like Florida, right, Tampa and Orlando together, generally has all four, but you could see some shift there. Nashville, places like that.
The local industry thing is interesting because that just shows how much money flows into that city, right? So that would be like
Mm-hmm.
what cities have the fans with the money to buy our merchandise and to pay to see us in person, or to pay for a subscription service to watch all of our games. And so that's an interesting thing that I hadn't really thought about. But yeah, like large companies based in certain cities, and advertisements. So like the Carolina Hurricanes official partner of whatever
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, like I don't know, Advance Auto Parts could be an official sponsor of the Carolina Hurricanes because their home base is here. Didn't know that till recently. But something like that I didn't really think of.
Yeah. Yep.
For expansion though, I want to ask, how do you feel about leaving the United States now for specific sports?
I think the Canada and Mexico examples logistically work better, but I do want to have like a prayer session for the first league that goes to Mexico City. I mean, like if it's baseball, they would have to do like the humidor at Coors Field in Colorado that like keeps everything on an even playing field in that like high elevation, low air mass situation. Mexico City makes like Denver look like it's sea level. So they would have to come up with another solution for that. And then just like the conditioning, those players that were playing on the Mexico City team, no matter what sport it is, an NBA team that plays in Mexico City, you get used to that altitude. You better be playing full court because to you're gonna go to the east and west coast and be at sea level and just run people off the floor. So that's one thing. I don't have a problem with it. I think the NHL's made it work. The NBA's made it work. The Raptors won an NBA championship. The Blue Jays have won 2 World Series. They've been successful recently. The problem with foreign teams comes back to money, because the exchange rate's different. The value of money is different in different countries. And sometimes the exchange rate gets weird. Sometimes players don't want to go play in Toronto because their money may buy more or less, if that makes sense. So sometimes that goes into the free agency decision of players, and their revenues in Toronto are different than the revenues in the United States because, again, of the exchange rate and things like that. So that would be a grapple. The London thing for the NFL, dude, I don't know.
I don't think there's any way to make it level. I don't think there's any way to make it level because what do? Someone's flying to England every week, or they're having to fly here. And what's the point of them being a London-based team, England-based team? I say London because that's just the city that they've talked about before, I believe. But
Yeah,
when
that's what it would be.
you when you
Yeah.
go over there, like you're playing an American-based sport that no one else in the world really cares about. Like is there an audience over there for it? I don't know. Like some people just go to the games probably to just laugh at us because like we think this is football, and no, that's not the same thing.
Yeah. That London series sells out, but I would think they could put people in the stadium when they saw the Yankees and Red Sox played in London and it sold out Wembley Stadium. So, I don't know that they would do that every day for sure. It would just be a logistical nightmare. I mean, you're talking about a team having to fly to London. We already have the thing about an East Coast team a West Coast team traveling to the East Coast and playing at 1:00. Like that's already a thing. Now we're talking about anybody in the United States traveling to London and playing a game. I don't know. I mean, you're talking about needing to be there way early, so maybe it's something that can happen if they go to 2 bye weeks in a season and put one of your bye weeks. If you're going to London, you get a bye week either before or after. And if you are, the Thursday night game, you get a bye week, before that. Maybe those are your 2 bye weeks. I don't know, but that's tough.
That'll be really hard to make it happen. But I want to go on the record and say that I am here for the Supersonics becoming a team again.
Yes, I think without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know that the new arena in Seattle was built to house basketball and hockey, but if it wasn't, they blew it. I would assume that the NBA going to expand would be Seattle and somewhere like Vegas, maybe Louisville, somewhere like that, but definitely Seattle. Just like I think baseball, we keep talking about Charlotte, but I think Portland is actually the shoe-in baseball for some other reasons because it just keeps being the name that's mentioned. I think Charlotte is the best in terms of the metrics, but I think Portland's the shoe-in, and then it's whoever gets in with them.
We're talking Oregon, not Maine.
Sorry, Mainers. You don't get anything. All right. So any last expansion thoughts other than I'm ready to see some?
I'm here for it. Mostly I'm here for it to come to Raleigh, to be local. I'm going to put on record that hockey, I would not call myself a Carolina Hurricanes fan, but if an MLS team came here, I would be that team's fan. Or like, I don't know why, but an MLS team here would just be sick. Now, I don't know now that they've come to Charlotte whether Raleigh is like fallen down a few pegs because there's already a team here, which really sucks, but we'll find out. They are building that stadium downtown, so maybe that'll happen.
That is just about all we have time for. As always, let us know if you got a topic you want us to cover. Hit us up on the Facebook or the Instagram or the Twitter. And that's what you don't know about expansion. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.
In the fast-paced world of American Nope.
He didn't even stutter.
The fast-paced world of American Nothing. That is wrong.
I would like to apologize to absolutely nobody.